Good evening and welcome, everybody. Cleveland Browns 22-13 winners today in Philadelphia over the Philadelphia Eagles. Certainly a lot to talk about as the Browns, with these two rookie quarterbacks. Basically, you got the Shedeur Sanders week last week. You got the Dillon Gabriel week this week. Um, Certainly both young quarterbacks to this point from each game they have played in, probably some positives. Um, you would expect that there's things to be worked on just naturally. We're not talking about, number one overall picks, even they struggle, obviously. We're going to just jump right into it. We're going to kick it off here. Fred Greetham with us. I know Fred is a little bit pressed for time. Fred, nobody's really gotten to see this from the OBR perspective more than you, pretty much being there almost every single day and kind of watching, the growth from these guys from the early beginning days in May to the point now where we're into the preseason schedule. Big Sanders week last week. Obviously, same scenario worked out this week where Shedeur was a little dinged up and Dillon got his opportunity. Some early thoughts, Fred.
You know, it since I've watched these guys, I think I felt all along that Gabriel looks like he's closer to being ready to play at the NFL level in practices. He just makes quicker decisions, gets rid of the ball, has a stronger arm. Um, Recently, I've seen him before the hamstring deal. He had a tendency to overthrow and throw higher, but they have different styles. But I think today kind of displayed what I saw early on: quick decisions, getting the ball out, not being afraid to check it down. I think the biggest thing was obviously a bad decision on that instead of throwing the ball away. But I just feel like it's a good situation for the Browns to have two rookie quarterbacks not taken in the first round that you feel like there's some potential to work with. Look on the other side. The starter for the Eagles was a guy that the Browns were thinking he was going to be their long term backup or answer. And I didn't see much out of him. He seems like he's regressed. Obviously, it wasn't a big sample, but as far as I think you got to be pleased. I think as Browns fans, they're kind of getting into this two camps, being very divisive. I mean, I think you want them both to play well because the more those guys show that there's opportunities, that could bode well for the future, whether one's the starter and one's the backup or vice versa. Then you don't have to go through the whole charade again of looking for another quarterback next year with your two draft picks. I'm not ready to say either one's the answer, but I think there's some positive things you're seeing that there's some potential with both these guys.
Jeff Lloyd hosting here the OBR postgame show. Cleveland Browns 22-13 winners today over the Philadelphia Eagles. We are joined by Fred Greetham. We have Pete Smith here as well. Ian McBride busting his butt for us, as always, behind the scenes, doing a fantastic job. Pete, I would say the one thing that probably stands out to me, and I think this is kind of when we hear, and we've gotten the coaches speak on what they think and what they like and appreciate with Dillon Gabriel. I definitely think there was definitely a quiet confidence today, and I think just the processing speed for Dillon Gabriel. And look, this could be just the overall product, of course, because now this is the second preseason game. But it just seemed like there was a little more like snap today as far as the offense.
Well, Dillon Gabriel plays on time, and that's a huge advantage, and it makes everybody else sort of play on time, which sort of works for him. I think by and large, after he dropped his eyes on the sack, I thought his pocket presence was better. The biggest complaints people said coming out of camp, which I wanted to see, was the accuracy. There was questions about his he was lights out accuracy-wise in this game. There were a couple throws. I still don't know how the ball got there, and part of that is because he's short. Particularly when he threw the ball at the sideline, managed to get it not only over the line, but over the defender's head and pluck it right there to the receiver because the DB had no time to make a play on the ball. Question: could Dillon Gabriel find plays over the middle? He could. My challenge, I guess, if you want to call it that, for Dillon Gabriel was show me what it is that the Browns like in you, and I saw it. And what I saw was like he's nowhere near as talented. Let me make this clear, but it looks a lot like what the Browns did with Baker Mayfield at quarterback. He was quick, he was efficient. They rolled him out quite a bit. He's athletic. So in that sense, and this isn't to say that he's better. What I would say is that you got two very different looking offenses with Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel, and both were effective. What I would say overall is that, one, I'm glad everybody took my advice and did not overreact to this and immediately proclaim that Dillon Gabriel needs reps with the ones, because by and large, he would warrant it the same way that Shedeur did based off last week. The reality is both deserve backup reps. They're not there yet. It's progress. That's what we want. We want them to get better. We want them to grow, but they've got a ways to go, which is exactly what you expect from a 3rd and 5th round pick. They acquitted themselves well. They look like they belong, which, I think a lot of people have been unfair to Dillon Gabriel. And some of that has been driven by certain elements in the media, which Dillon Gabriel sort of took a shot at, because there are any number of fans, like particularly I'll hear all about it from fans who think that Dillon Gabriel is absolutely terrible and have never actually seen him play. So I'm happy from him from that standpoint. So, the interception was awful on any number of levels. He threw a pass he shouldn't have. The receivers were god awful. It looks like Blake Whiteheart actually pulls his hands away, or is weirdly like defending himself or something. The ball surprised him for the pick, and Dillon Gabriel owned it. The fumble, you're going to put it on the quarterback, and Dillon Gabriel put it on himself. The only question I have is what I don't know is what's the quarterback's line supposed to be and what's the running back's line supposed to be. In other words, it's possible that Pierre Strong is on the wrong line, and that's why it ends up being an awkward reach. Either way, those turnovers look bad, but whereas Shedeur had punts when he was in there, and one of which was capitalized on a Buki Watson turnover, we'll get to Buki Watson, who's doing a nice job. Dillon Gabriel just, he had the turnovers, but when they didn't turn the ball over, it was crisp, clean. 3rd down, he was fantastic for what you want to see. Did he make any? He doesn't have the array of throws that Shedeur Sanders has. He doesn't have that big of a toolbox as far as throws he can make. But the throws he can make, he makes at a high level. And receivers caught the ball on time. He put them in position to maximize yards after the catch. Is exactly what you want from him. As I agree with Fred's assessment, it doesn't make me think that Dillon Gabriel has starting potential. I basically am, falling back on what I thought coming out of the draft, which is he's most likely to be a long-term backup. Maybe he can be a left-handed Case Keenum, and that's what the Browns are hoping for. But I thought he did well for what he was asked to do.
We actually were talking about it, and as far as the fumble, look, I mean, the tough thing there is to try and say who it is. Look, we know Pierre Strong. That's kind of one of the Achilles heels Pierre Strong has as far as ball security. And Gabriel, look, I mean, you're the quarterback. You should just put it on yourself. I do agree, honestly, with the interception though. Blake Whiteheart kind of looked like the old, the shortstop going out, the outfielder coming in, and one of them going, I got it. You take it at the last second, and then neither one of them essentially knew what to do from that standpoint. Fred, I don't disagree with you any way whatsoever. That's one where you just go throw it to your mom. Like you realized it wasn't there. Obviously the opportunity wasn't there. Live to fight another play. But hey, rookie quarterback, first preseason game. It's totally understandable that you're jacked up, of course, and keeping in mind he hasn't played football, of course, since January, and then probably trying to go out there and stay in the moment, play clear and concise. Even though he sat there last week watching Shedeur basically have his night, and there was not an opportunity for Dillon, unfortunately, that evening, that certainly, probably was something. If you asked Dillon Gabriel again, he probably would have just wanted to throw it into the cheap seats. I think one of my assessments, though, and, Fred, this is a 3-14 team coming here into 2025. We have yet to see Joe Flacco. We have yet to see the top running, but well, I mean, Jerome Ford, of course, we'll see the way the Quinshon Judkins things works out, but no David Njoku, no Jerry Jeudy to this point. And anywhere Jerry Judy's gone through a couple of joint practices, and certainly the Browns secondary guys will tell you that Jerry Judy's been an extremely difficult cover so far this spring and this summer. I think, Fred, I think after now the second preseason game, certainly, all of us, are waiting to wet the whistle as far as seeing the starters, but you see maybe necessarily, and I don't want to bring that name up of a quarterback who's on the roster but not playing, of course, but you see that the offensive system, it's there if the guys are just willing to play within the system.
Yeah, I go back to last year. I said all before the season, if Deshaun Watson just plays average with this defense, they can win. They could get to the playoffs. If they're going to go anywhere, he's going to have to be above average or elite. Well, we know what happened. Those first 7 games when they went 1-6, I contend the defense played well enough to win 5 of those 7 games. And then we, just human nature, whatever you want to call it, when you're 1-6, the season's over and the defense just starts falling apart. But I think the hopefulness here is that defense is playing well. And today was the depth, guys. You're seeing a lot of depth on that defensive line. And I think that's your recipe for success, is that if you can throw that defense and get back to keep your offense in games, a Joe Flacco-led offense can be able to get you more than 15 points a game with a good running game, and then, be judicious in the passing game. I think that's what they didn't have last year. They had a historically bad offense, especially those first 7 games. Defense held the opponents to 20 or less, I think, 5 of those 7 games, and the offense couldn't score more than 16, 17 points. So that's what bodes well, is that I think a Joe Flacco can be a little steady at the wheel, and they can pick their spots and put some points on the board, and the defense can keep them in and allow them to be competitive and win games.
All right, Fred, I know you don't have a lot of time here, and when we're doing these preseason shows, certainly everybody, look, headliners are one thing, but, the true football fans are, hey, 40 guy, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53 on the roster. Some thoughts here, we're getting a little bit in deeper, the wide receiver room looks like it's going to have an interesting addition maybe somewhere within the next 24 hours. I'm not sure how big of a shakeup that's going to be overall. But some guys here, Fred, maybe bottom fringe guys that all of a sudden, I know we talked about it last week after the Panther game, guys we wanted to see more of. We're starting to kind of get that opportunity. But some of these guys, you've certainly, between 2 games and certainly, being in Berea almost every day, Carolina, Philadelphia, whatever it is, who are some guys that just seem to, like, they're not going away, in your opinion?
Well, that Caden Davis and Gage Lavardane, they just keep making plays every time they give them a chance to see what they can do. I know they signed DeAndre Carter, but he's 32 years old. If these guys can be the returner, then they're much more factors in the receiving game. Carter's never really been much of a receiver. So I think that they're carving out a place, if not on the active roster, at least on practice squad. So those are 2, especially on offense. And, there's a number of guys, on defense, on the defensive line. Julian Aquara, I think he's had 2 or 3 big plays in the 2 games, and he was kind of like, just a guy, they brought in. And, Tryon, was in on a play a day, and I like him. A lot of these coming from different ways. So, but I think on offense, the 2 wide receivers, it's good to see Jamari Thrash. It looks like legitimately he can be a top 4 receiver for this team.
I don't disagree with you on Jamari Thrash. I think Jamari Thrash, at this point, you're kind of maybe wondering, where Deontay Johnson is going to fit in all of this. You just, it's not there yet. And, it seems weird that you ask a veteran of his age, to see something in the preseason, but, certainly he's not been in Cleveland very long. Jamari Thrash, the initial look at Jamari Thrash, and he was a talk of the spring. He's kind of been a talk of the summer. just looks physically better, and certainly looks like committed to the weight room. Obviously, trying to put on good weight here. Pete, when you were talking about Dillon Gabriel's ball placement, I definitely was thinking, Jamari Thrash, some of those outside, high and away. Either your guy catches it or it's an incomplete pass, and Jamari Thrash obviously was able to get his hands up, obviously snag some of these balls here today for Dillon Gabriel. The wide receiver room is certainly going to be interesting the way it works out. And your point on DeAndre Carter, because I saw some today. Well, he's their top return guy. Well, you're a 3-14 team coming back this year. For me, a top return guy, if Carter still is that in this day and age, that is a luxury. That is a team that is a thing. Certain playoff teams, like your Chiefs, your Bills, you want to spend a roster spot on a prime, return guy, go ahead, knock yourselves out. But when you're trying to, get younger, get more talent onto a roster, if you got a guy that can do 2-3 things, and, I think Gage will have ordained between, obviously showing the ability, to run reverses, his ability as a receiver, his ability to, contribute as a returner. I don't necessarily need a 32-year-old guy who just returned kicks. I would rather take advantage on the undrafted free agent who, seems like, the dog that just won't go away. He will keep going at it. The running game today, Pete, it had a couple of moments, and, certainly there's going probably to be a shift in the way this room, as we talk about it in this post-game show, as opposed to the way we were talking about it a week ago after Carolina. But Amani Marshall, I got to be honest, probably going to be a guy that hopefully can make his way to the practice squad. But his patience, and we talked about this last week, he's a guy that kind of really suits the Cleveland Browns running game.
Yeah, I mean, for the whole way, I basically thought that the Browns were going to make a waiver claim at some point because there's too many good running backs on teams. But, he refuses to be ignored in terms of how he plays. It's yeoman's work with him. He always gives you a little more than you think you're going to get, which is how you make a roster. He gives you a little bit more as a pass blocker. He gives you a little bit more as a runner. He's strong. He's got size. And, I think in a lot of ways, he's exactly the type of player/person, based off his play that Deuce Staley loves. So, I still think the Browns are going to make some kind of waiver claim, whether they get it now, they they may basically use waiver claim to get some other position and sort of live with Amani Marshall, as far as priorities are concerned. But like, it's hard not to be forced to take him seriously at this point. Now, I would say he's far and away above everybody else, whether it's Pierre Strong or the kid from UFL. I think he's easily a bit above the rest of those guys. Now, the other part about that is, the Browns' running game is predicated on their line. And this is the second preseason game in a row. And granted, it's been backup, save for DeJuan Jones for the early part of this game. But they're moving guys off the ball. They did not do that last year. They are creating opportunities for guys to create yardage. It's not sexy in terms of like huge plays, but they are getting yardage. They're keeping the offense on schedule, which is part of what has allowed both Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel to be successful. Is it's not 3rd and 12. It's not 3rd and 8. It's 3rd and 5, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 2. And it gives you the whole playbook, and it gives you the option to use play action. It gives you the option to use your legs. It gives you these avenues, and that's really important. And obviously, we're going to sit here and continue to wait to see what happens with Quinshon Judkins and his whole situation. But that becomes a huge piece, because with Quinshon Judkins, obviously he was going to be a beneficiary of the run blocking, but they were expecting him to sort of make it happen. Everybody else is largely going to be a product of what they're going to be able, what the blocking they get, and maybe they give you a little extra. So that has been a pleasant surprise. Luke Whippler has been fantastic in 2 games, has been absolutely fantastic. Zach Zinter had the early miscue. I'm curious to see what else he was able to do in this game. But, the big question everybody's going to have now is what's up with Cornelius Lucas's ankle, because they can't afford to lose him or basically anyone on that line. But maybe they have a little bit more depth than people are giving them credit for, and it's at least worth seeing where this group can go.
And certainly, I mean, you're talking about a left tackle who's, had injury issues his first 2 years in the league, and everybody else on the starting offensive line is over 30 years old. Fred, we definitely, I got to get this one to you while you're with us. You spend a lot of time, and we're going to talk about the media. And if you guys didn't check it out this week, Fred Reith and Mike Keefe, they are going to basically have a show once a week, and it's going to be some of Fred's constituents, current, past, and, share some stories, obviously, about what all goes down and what goes into detail with all that they do. When the words came out of Dillon Gabriel's mouth, as far as competitor versus entertainer, I think we all kind of maybe gave a little bite to the lower lip, like, I think everybody kind of understands what Dillon Gabriel is saying, but it's like, well, sometimes, just even a simple line in and around NFL media can all of a sudden just kind of take on a life of its own.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's drama people in my room out there for sure. And, I just really don't like that kind of stuff. And
that's why we love you, Fred. Straight X's and O's.
Yeah, I just want to stay with football. But yeah, I mean that's gonna draw, clicks or whatever it might be. And I guess I didn't take it as that. I didn't know to be honest, I didn't know what he was talking about or what the comment was. But I don't think that deep into these things. Some of the other ones do, and then you get those responses. So yeah, not much comment on it.
Yeah, it's something that you kind of have to be careful of, Pete. I think we all kind of, know what he meant, but people are going to try to always turn something into something more than it was. And my first thought was, I kind of thought of the song "The Entertainer" by Billy Joel, which is a fantastic track, by the way. And it was one of those ones, I'm sure if Dillon Gabriel had the moment over again, it would have been like, yeah, I probably would have phrased that a little bit differently.
Well, I mean, just based on the quote itself, it never made sense it was going to be about Shedeur Sanders because they both have the same job. They don't have different
How do you
jobs.
say that and know you got to go sit in a meeting with him tomorrow and break down film for probably 2 to 3 hours?
Well, and then it goes beyond that because obviously Shedeur Sanders had his own confrontation caught on camera, may have been designed, I don't know, with Tony Grossi in terms of, and it wasn't like it was mean-spirited or anything. It was lighthearted, basically saying, you don't have anything, why don't you ever have anything nice to say about me? Well, Dillon Gabriel, since the moment he's been drafted, has been absolutely just destroyed by people who will not give him a chance, who will not allow him to just operate. And even today, even in our chat right now, there are people who think he's absolutely awful. And it was clear as day for anyone who watched. He was effective. The pick was bad, but he was effective and did exactly what you want him to do. He plays the way he plays. And is that going to ultimately validate a third-round pick? Unclear. But he did his job. So, there's that little Baker Mayfield in him again, in terms of getting his little clap back. And you know exactly who he's talking about. And it's weird that, that I'm fascinated by the notion that kids in their 20s are still paying attention to radio, but hey, nevertheless, here we are. So, but the thing I would caution Dillon Gabriel on, as with all of these, is whether it's radio or sports writers or whatever, they always have the microphone, they always have the pen. So when you go messing with that stuff, they're always going to get the last word if you screw up later, and they will hold a grudge. So I enjoy it for him in the moment because I wanted him to succeed because people have been so ridiculous with him. But you can't keep doing this. You got to move on. You just got to be about the business at this point and be effective, because if you do, we've seen it. It becomes a back and forth and a long-standing feud, and it's particularly in Cleveland. We don't have a long history of it working out well for the player.
And Pete, I mean, as soon as you brought up Baker Mayfield, I mean, I can think to myself the amount of times we had this conversation where it was like, yeah, somebody's going to make a T-shirt out of that, but Baker's going to pay for this for a week and a half. The pen is sometimes mightier than the sword. Fred, some closing thoughts here. I mean, I got to be honest. Through 2 weeks here, this defense, and again, we're not seeing the main attractions here. And even this week, we saw less than we did the week before. No Mason Graham this week. No Carson Schlesinger this week. Certainly most of, the top part of the secondary, not part of it. Pete brought up a name like Buki Watson. And this defense definitely feels and looks a lot more reminiscent of the 2023 version of the Jim Schwartz defense in Cleveland, as opposed to the 2024 version of Jim Schwartz's defense.
Yeah, I think that, we've seen the first two, but today I thought, they just keep coming with, different guys, and you see a lot of ways to come at. And if you can get that with the defensive line, I think that is the engine. And if they can put the pressure on it, it'll help out. I'm most concerned with the secondary because of the depth or lack of depth at corner and even at safety. But I feel that if they can control, if Graham and Schlesinger can hit the ground running, I think this team has a chance to be in the top 10 again, maybe even higher. And that will allow them to be competitive. They weren't competitive last year because they couldn't get off the field on third down like they could in 23. And they gave up too many points, in the second half of the season. But they started well. And then I just think when you're 1-6, in the back of your mind, the season's over, and they just started playing down, and I think renewed opportunity. I think that's their path, is defense, keep them in games. But, we'll see as it goes. I'm going to have to run. So really, it's good talking with you guys. And I'm sure we'll get some more in.
Of course, guys, as always, everybody go to the OBR.com. Make sure you're checking everything out, from Fred Greetham, obviously, busting his butt here for us on the, the written content side. He and Pete, a huge part of this. Fred, go get some rest, buddy. It's been a long few days for you.
You should check out Fred's new show on the Browns beat. And here's what I would say through two games. I'm really glad we're talking about how the Browns rookie quarterbacks are doing good things. I'm really glad they don't have to face the Browns defensive line. It is an absolute. People are going to get jokes off on DTR, and that's fine and warranted.
That hit he took from Okora. That hit he took from Okora. I thought they were going to just start digging the hole. That was vicious.
But it has to be awful to play against this front. It is awful. They are coming from everywhere, and they're not blitzing much. This is a group that Myles Garrett has not played preseason, obviously, thank God, despite certain sources suggesting that he was going to play today. Malik Collins has not played today, or not played. Mike Hall has not yet played. I hope that what we've seen from Isaiah McGuire is a hint of things to come, because he's going against second string, but he beat the brakes off the Eagles' backups in this game. And that sack, the sack he got credit for, not the one that ended up flying in the air and tipped in every which way. He absolutely destroyed that poor tackle. To the thought, on initial live viewing, I thought it was a stunt. He just beat the hell out of his inside shoulder and drove right through him. Alex Wright is certainly interesting. Given what he missed, I think that could be a nice boost for them if he can be sort of that next guy, or if he's, let's say he's 2B to Isaiah McGuire's 2A across from Myles Garrett. That would be fantastic. I would like to see more from Joe Tryon. I haven't seen a ton. Now he got the one pressure. That's fine. I would like to see more from him. But like Juwan Briggs, he's doing exactly what I expect him to do. He is strong as an ox inside, and he bench presses guys and makes plays from that standpoint. And yes, the man pictured, my guy, Aiden Huntington. Not as exciting a day for him, but he still had almost a kickoff tackle again, and he had a big pressure up the middle that resulted in a Donovan McMillan pass breakup, and he's just fun. Cam Thomas is a really interesting player. Had 2 penalties, which isn't great, but just his activity level, he's trying to make a case for himself. But you just go on and on and on down the list. The kid who showed up 2 days ago is getting pressures with this front, whose name Titus Leo, who looks like just this long angular rusher. He's getting in there for pressure. So that has been great. And then the beneficiary for that has been those linebackers. And let's get to Buki Watson, who, had obviously the fumble recovery on the punt team last week, and then loses an interception this week because of a penalty. But nobody's going to care about that as far as evaluation. He did his job. He had a couple big plays, and this was a guy who I thought was absolutely lost last year. Did very little. He's making a case for himself, especially through the vein of, I still assume that Devin Bush is going to get suspended at some point. And he could potentially step in and be exactly what they need him to be, which is that Sam linebacker – well, at this point, just Sam linebacker, because part of it was thinking he could be the Sione Takitaki Big Mike. And they don't need that anymore because they got Carson Schlesinger. But Sam linebacker, he can do those things. And I thought he had a really strong performance. So it's making the linebackers better by virtue of just the amount of activity. But it's absolute nightmare for offensive linemen on the opposing team and quarterbacks on the opposing team. They had a decent chunk run or two, but even that was it was tough sledding the whole way, and the Browns just controlled the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, my thing with Buki Watson, and the thing is, and look, it happens when you're a rookie in the league, and certainly last year would have been an opportunity for Buki Watson in what became a lost season to find his way. But I think it's stop thinking, react. And I think for Buki Watson, that's kind of what you're starting to see. Don't question yourself. You know what I'm saying? You are in this system now. It's not a new defensive system for you. It's your second year within the system. If you think you see it, go for it. Don't hesitate in none of that stuff. And I think that showed up certainly with the 3 tackles for loss. But I think where you're kind of going with this, and I'm kind of going with this as well, is these conversations about getting positional rooms to 5 defensive ends, possibly 4 to 5 defensive tackles, 5. All of a sudden, these conversations, and we all sit here, and part of the contact game, and one of the biggest pieces that people like this time of year are 53-man roster predictions. After 2 weeks right now, that's just not so easy, my man.
Well, I still have a sense where I think the defensive line is going, but it's cutting at least one player who is going to play for an NFL team and contribute. Bottom line, I'm increasingly believing that Shelby Harris is going to be the odd man out because he's 34, and the Browns are looking for the future. But
I got to think they didn't play Shelby Harris today just to say, hey, we need you to get a little work. I think they were hoping that maybe Shelby Harris, scored a sack or something. And, maybe you could get a little chunk of change for Shelby Harris. We don't know where Mike Hall is, and there's no reason to rush Mike, obviously. The potential and the ceiling is pretty high for Mike Hall. But, I don't know that there's necessarily a reason that, Shelby Harris would probably have to be kept around here. Juwan Briggs, and I keep going back to this, is another guy who looks like that. There was a different strategy for him the offseason as far as weight work, this, that, and the other thing. He looked like a little bit of a younger, bigger kid this year. Now he looks like a little bit more of a filled out man.
Well, Juwan Briggs is the proof that there are bad numbers. He was 53 last year. He got cut, put on the practice squad, and then he comes back 97. He's a new man. He was really good down the stretch in those last 4 games.
Yes.
Some of it just comes down to the fact they continue to use Alex Wright inside. And when you do that over and over and over again, you're going to at some point need another edge. And it's not going to be, that's where it becomes Shelby Harris is going to be a 3. That's what he is. So if you're continuing to use more and more Alex Wright, and you have Aiden Huntington, who I still think is going to make this team, who's either in a 3 or a 4, what some of those, when they go sort of a 50 front and they do some of that stuff, he widens out a little, but he's never at end. So they need somebody else who's going to be able to take some of those reps, and that's where I think it could be Cam Thomas. But yeah, if it is not Cam Thomas, if they decide they are keeping Shelby Harris and they cut Cam Thomas, I think Cam Thomas is going to go somewhere and play. But that's a good problem to have. Now, ultimately, I think if the Browns are going to cut or make a move off Shelby Harris, I think they will cut him out of respect and let him choose his own destination at 34 years old. And the fact he was good for the Browns for the last 2 years, but we shall see. But that's one of those things where, or it's a trade where it's somewhere he wants to go. I suppose that's a possibility. But yeah, there are areas the Browns have concerns. There are areas that they have to address or hope they can find answers within, most likely answers within their own roster. But defensive line, where they were already rich, and they drafted Mason Graham, and he looks everything with him looks like he's going to be very, very good. And then to find Aiden Huntington, to get Cam Thomas as a waiver claim at the end of last year and just keep him on the roster throughout the offseason. And now he's something that could be useful. It's working for them. They're finding guys that Jim Schwartz is finding the right mix. It looks like the group he wants now, in a way that it hasn't really ever looked like that. Even 2023, I don't think that's the ideal mix. I think he's got that now, and they are absolutely terrorizing people.
No question. And, the one comment about Shelby Harris, that was my point. They put a 34-year-old guy into a preseason game today, trying to hopefully maybe show a little bit of something. Pete, the wide receiver room, obviously the conversations, are certainly picking up even more steam. And, we're doing a post game here, so not necessarily, going to get to that. That'll come to fruition when it comes to fruition. Between Thrash, Deontay Johnson being there, Caden Davis, Lavar Dane, again, look, they're not getting, playing with first team against first team defense in these games, but, you have to make the most of the opportunity you're given. And, I would say that's pretty much kind of been the case. It's not necessarily been the case for Deontay Johnson. Certainly Mr. Thrash is one of them as well. And, I think, and Deontay Johnson, to his credit, has come here and has kind of, reinvented himself. Well, maybe not reinvented himself, got himself basically back on the right path, the correct path. But I'm not sure if there's the way this shakes out that they're just going to guarantee something for Deontay Johnson. And it's tough when you have some of these kids who were, contributing. And again, this could definitely change because there's going to be some teams that are going to unload a couple, some teams are going to unload some decent wide receivers with probably a little bit more of a true, proven background than these kids that have kind of, caught everybody's heart here over the last couple of weeks. But it's kind of getting a little bit more interesting with the wide receiver room because, people are stepping up and trying to make the most of what the opportunities that they're getting.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see, and maybe it's happening with practices. With Jamari Thrash, it sounds like he's getting some opportunities to prove himself because, you like what you see, but, it needs to be against the ones. Having said that, what he's doing looks like stuff that will translate. The way he's smooth in the way he catches the ball and turns upfield and gains extra yardage. He seems to be running effective routes. I have questions with Deontay Johnson that naturally come about with Deontay Johnson is how focused are you? Are you getting bored? Are you content to sort of be washed away from this whole thing? I don't see a whole lot of fight from him, and maybe it's on some level. It's just a matter of it's the preseason. He just wants to get through it unhurt and all that stuff. But, if you're just looking for guys who are fighting harder, Larvadan is fighting harder and can return punts. Mm-hmm. Fearless punt returner. He is not afraid to catch the ball with guys around him and try to return it. Caden Davis, nothing about him is particularly exciting, and that may be what sort of limits him. But he just catches the ball, gets open and catches the ball and makes plays. And again, there were a couple really well placed passes that allowed him to catch and run. And then you've got this whole Isaiah Bond thing coming, and we've got to see what that's going to turn into. Is 3 weeks enough to matter for Isaiah Bond?
Very true.
After all these guys have been working for months, and are you going to want to cut a guy who's been busting it every day working like Larvadan for the sake of Isaiah Bond? I'd be more amenable to an argument about Deontay Johnson. You're basically saying, look, he's 28. We aren't getting what we need out of him, so we're going to go ahead and go younger and take a flyer. Now your room gets very young when you do that, but that to me is more intriguing than Gage Larvadan. I would rather reward him for what he's doing because, again, it looks like stuff that will translate. But again, I would like to see it. I would like to see it prove itself and do those things. But I guess, I want to say cautiously optimistic overall. I just don't know how far it's going to go with that group. I believe in Cedric Tillman. I just stay healthy and get a run going. particularly when Joe Flacco is named the starter, he's going to get Cedric Tillman the ball. And Cedric Tillman, if he makes the plays, he's going to pay it off.
He's the only one that's got a relationship with Joe in this wide receiver room. He's the only one that's got a relationship with Joe.
Jerry Jeudy, there's no reason to believe he won't be excellent player this year. And then it's who else is going to step up, and or are we just going to turn it into David Njoku and Harold Fannin are basically going to do it for everybody else and make the receivers less important. So yeah, there's still a lot of time. 3 weeks is still a lot of time in terms of figuring out, how this is going to come down to the wire to figure out those last couple spots. I know there's some people holding hope that the Browns are going to get something on waivers. I just don't expect anything all that enticing to come out there.
And the thing is, though, and I agree with you, and maybe that's probably the counterpoint to my thought, is that, is anything going to come in here and directly be that much of a, monumental change from, the guys that are here and have been competing, obviously have been showing well. The Isaiah Bond thing.
The thing you have to remember is how many of those guys in that room are going to contribute on special teams. I could be wrong. I don't think Deontay Johnson has ever played special teams. That's another thing that hurts him. You're not going to ask Jerry Jeudy to be on special teams. That's stupid.
No.
So
you're not going to risk Tillman's health on special teams? No.
I could see a small scenario, but most likely not. So you're going to get it from somewhere. And that's where a guy like Gage Larvin, it becomes extraordinarily valuable because he shows you capability in the return game. But somebody else is going to have to be able to, whether it's covering, protecting on punts or whatever, you're going to have to get something else out of that room. It can't and that's where I have my concern with Isaiah Bond, who again, 3 weeks has almost no special teams experience. And you need, yes, there's a world where you can theoretically carry him and just plan on, not getting much from him, but somebody in that group has to be able to step in and do something because, let's use Larvin as an example. He gets hurt. Who's the next man up? Like you got to get reps from somewhere. So that's where you have to balance out that room.
And the thing with Bond, and Pete keeps saying 3 weeks. You got to keep in mind the Cleveland Browns don't return to the practice field till Tuesday. So they practice Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, off Friday, final preseason game on Saturday. Number one is, you assume Bond is working out, but it's a whole different ballgame from the workouts you're doing as opposed to, now you're legit into NFL practices. And for Bond, these will be his first NFL practices. A lot of times in a scenario like this, a guy comes out and what's usually the first scenario, Pete? They try to go 125%. And then it's, the quad's a little cranky or, calf's a little, so there's that type of stuff you have to worry about. And yeah, he's interesting. It truly is. As far as what should be the strengths of his game, those are probably some of the things he struggles with. Isaiah Bond is a guy you want to get the ball in his hand while he's moving at top speed. When you are a guy that kind of leaves your feet at the catch point, that is the first thing you're doing is eliminating speed. But look, Pete and I will always tell you, we're not huge. We'd rather pass on the guys that have off-field issues. I've gone through this whole day on social media. Guys, you've all been following me forever. I've never changed on this stance. I've always been the same on this, okay? I'd rather just pass because the thing is, you don't want to get excited, fall in love with a player, and then all of a sudden the old habit resurfaces and, all of a sudden you lose that player. I am very excited about the aspect of this type of player. You all have your jokes about me and Anthony Schwartz, but I think there's, that type of thing, a little bit different, but athletic makeups probably. Bond doesn't have the Olympic speed that Anthony Schwartz necessarily had. But I mean, and Pete and I'll tell you the simplicity of it. You put him on the field, and if you have no intention of throwing the ball, what do you tell him to do? Run a 9 route. Hopefully a second guy chases you. And guess what? That means David Njoku's open, or Jerry Jeudy's open, or Cedric Tillman's open, or nobody covered the back out of the backfield. There's ways that you can be productive. But it's a real quick turnaround by the time Bond could possibly take a practice field on Tuesday. By the time we're in game week for the Bengals. And, there's a lot to be made up. It's not like anybody's given him a playbook yet. And the closer you get to the regular season, the less amount of work, normally has to go into this because it's not full on training camp mode. Now it's game week mode. And that kind of changes things. And that's why a group like the NFL Players Association exists. So this is a lot of stuff that, Bond is going to have to do on himself. and he's going to have to find people within the organization who are going to volunteer, time to sit with him and get him as fastly up to speed as they possibly can. So look, it's a great idea. It truly is. Could mean something. Could not turn out to be anything. Some of the things that I took today on social media about it, please come at me with, the draft rankings before the draft, not the ones that got thrown out August before college football began last year. Because, I don't look, I love banting back and forth with you guys, but at least, kind of bring it in the correct way here. And of course, the same thing's going to kind of go, Quinshon's obviously got a little bit under his belt, had a little time here. But, if Quinshon Judkins is able to practice on Tuesday, I don't think he's a full-time player by week 1 against the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think the way that you think so.
3 weeks. 3 weeks is a lot of time to get a running back ready. And it's not like he the difference with him is there's feel things that are different in terms of like play action and some of the pass protection stuff. But in terms of here's the ball and run
behind
a lot of time.
Run behind Wyatt.
Yeah, I mean that part I don't think takes a lot of time. Now, is that realistic? I don't know. But running back's the one position where you can do this pretty quickly.
That's true. We've seen guys traded on a Tuesday.
Pull out an old example.
On Monday.
Emmitt Smith holds out the first 2 weeks of the season, gets his contract, and then immediately starts dominating based off no practice time. Like, obviously, it's an adjustment moving from college to NFL, but it's running back. That's the one position you can do it. With Isaiah Bond, the price is right. That's why you're okay with this, because if he screws around, you can cut him. Has better ball tracking and hands than Anthony Schwartz, but Anthony Schwartz could legitimately play on special teams as a gunner. But Isaiah Bond has an element that has been a part of the Browns since Kevin Stefanski got here, whether it's been Rashad Perryman, whether it's been Kadero Hodge, whether it's been Anthony Schwartz, any number of these guys. They've always had somebody who could force a safety back, create spacing for everybody else, because they're that fast and that dangerous, because you can't not cover them. Whatever you want to say about Anthony Schwartz, they still had to cover him. So how far does it go? I don't know. Is there enough time? We'll see. Is he even in shape?
That's the biggest question.
In shape relative to the average person, in shape to
not Instagram shape or TikTok shape. Are you in shape to put on the pads and the helmet come Tuesday?
Now, having said that, given what the Browns have dealt with, sort of this weird off season, and I'm not going to get into what they did or didn't, other than to say that the court is not pressing charges on either of them. That is talent that can give the Browns a boost. There's all kinds of questions that we're never going to get real answers to, and then this is unfortunately part of the problem. Even if they're both entirely innocent, there's always, and did nothing wrong, there's always this question with them. But at the same point, there are questions that are reasonable to ask of both of them. And we are never going to get the answers.
Yeah. And look, I know there was, a certain show that kind of, brought up, the Browns culture when Isaiah, look, you see this team last week in Carolina, you saw this team, I'm going to say throughout most of this week in Philadelphia. I'm not concerned. And I think maybe, and look, culture can go up and down really, really quick. And obviously a lot of it has to do with winning and losing. But I believe the culture of this team right now is in a really, really good spot. And, and when you see, 5-6 hats to the football, that kind of tells me more about culture than a possible signing late in the summer of a guy who was an undrafted free agent. Is everybody on page? That kind of stuff, that's what resonates more to me. Is the on-field product usually is going to tell you more about the culture of this team than certainly bringing in of a guy who, had an issue and unfortunately, became basically off the draft radar altogether. Pete, this is what I do want to actually bring up. Third tight end. How does this even go? Obviously we know what we got in David. Harold Fannin a little bit this week in the joint practices. They kind of used him like a Meadowlark Lemon, where it was, throwing in the ball, a hook and lateral, all types of fun stuff. And, not shocking because it's kind of some of the stuff he did at Bowling Green. Where do they go here? Because, I'm not trying to discredit Fannin, but, just like when David came into the league, what was one of the longest things to develop was the correct stance, which allowed you to become the blocker that you needed to be. These are things with Fannin, with his relative overall inexperience to the position, his age, obviously, as he's still a growing young man. How does that work out? I mean, what are we looking? Are we looking for a glorified third tackle? Or are we hey, are we going to find a way to get your boy, Aiden some run, maybe as a fullback or a third tight end, short yardage blocker, so we can find a way to justify that roster spot?
Well, based on what I see, I don't think it's going to be an F. I think it's going to be a Y, inline guy. Look, I would have thought Blake Whiteheart was the overwhelming favorite. Maybe he still is, but obviously that play gives you some question. I think it's between him and the other big kid. What's his face? There's another big Y. Bates.
Oh, Bates.
Unless there's some surprise cut somewhere that they really like. I think you're going to end up with one of those two guys as the third tight end. I don't know. It's very difficult to handicap that because you don't want a lineman, because the Browns will just put a lineman out there. If that's the case, they need somebody who can give you something in terms of pass catching and being able to do something. That's part of why I've been inclined to Blake Whiteheart, is because, obviously this preseason notwithstanding, the preseason game anyway, that he always gave you a little extra when he caught the ball last year, and he came up with some nice catches in big spots. But if Bates can give you that, he's got more size and can do all those things. And the Browns want to be a play action heavy team. Who's a guy who can stick a block and then, release and then make an easy play. That may be the difference. All
right. This is actually one, because I know Pete and I actually discussed this a little bit today, on X, for old man here. Certainly it's nickel corner. But Pete, conversations about that cornerback room in general, certainly, it was going to be, once Emerson went down, it was definitely an interesting thing, because this team has basically had the same three corners now for pretty much an extended period. So, Cam Mitchell, he's never really gotten a chance to develop. He hasn't really gotten a chance to play that often, of course. But there's some issues there, Pete. And this certainly could be a room that, certainly, there could be a little help wanted sign, hanging in that room.
Unclear. So I grant you it is not looking good right now. And part of that is like people are mad at Cameron Mitchell. Understandably, he's not playing well. And there's a thing he's doing that's annoying the crap out of me, which is that when the Browns are sending blitzes and stuff, he's predisposed to play conservatively when they need him to be more aggressive there. When the clock is going to be shortened by extra pressure, he's playing conservatively. He did this with Tedero McMillan last week and sort of gave up underneath play. They allowed them to extend a drive. And then here it was in the red zone. Instead of taking away the hard, taking away the slant there with inside leverage, he sort of backs. He's backing away, which is inverted in terms of how you want him to play it. I'm fascinated by this whole thing because not long ago, before Martin Emerson was hurt, people could not wait to get rid of Greg Newsome, and now all of a sudden the Browns need corner help. I am very curious, and I'm wondering if we're actually getting a hint of where this is going. The Cameron Mitchell is playing outside in these preseason games with Greg Newsome and Denzel Ward out. I'm wondering if Miles Harden's going to end up being that guy. But what I would say on a larger scale is 32 teams need corners. 32 teams are looking for corner help. So if you think, we're going to be out there and we're going to get guys and they're going to fix the whole thing right away, I don't know a single corner on the Dolphins who's worth a damn right now. They have nothing.
They flipped their entire secondary, top to bottom. The entire secondary.
They traded Jalen Ramsey. Okay, but then I believe Cater Cahill, or however you pronounce his name, I believe he's out for the year.
Yes, he is.
That happened almost immediately. So they have nothing at corner. So look, I could see a scenario where the Browns, they're going to be number 2 in the waiver claim order, that they use their initial claim, the one they desperately need to be awarded, to get a corner. But do I expect that guy to come in and start? No, I do not, because everybody needs starting help. And if they need it that badly, they will do what the Eagles did and trade for it.
Yep.
That is the problem. And I don't know how much you want to really, unless it's a player you're not going to keep for somebody else. Like I'll use Cam Thomas as an example. Let's say they're content with Shelby Harris. Cam Thomas is there, and they're going to go, we're going to trade Cam Thomas for a team. Let's say Minnesota. Let's use Khalif Halassi as an example, although he had, I think, 2 picks in the first preseason game. Not great for that. Let's say they're going to trade Cam Thomas to Minnesota so they can get Khalif Halassi. Okay, but like, 1, that's not a nickel corner. But 2, do you really expect him to step in and start? No. What's more than likely going to happen, the preseason is not, you're not scheming much. You're going to then now put extra attention to help, whether it's, linebacker, safety, whatever you're going to do to now help that spot. You're not just going to leave them out to dry, and you're going to use scheme to try to hide your holes. But like, here's the other thing I'm looking at through 2 preseason games. Do you feel good about either the Carolina or Eagles secondary right now? And again, the Eagles just traded for Corian Bennett, who I liked coming out of college, but Dillon Gabriel torched them. Like, so this is the problem you're going to run into, is everybody needs help. And granted, the Browns have more, specific needs, but the problem you run into is nickel is nickel is nickel. There's only so many ways to play that position. So obviously they have Lamarian James, who's in the concussion protocol. I think they really like him. I think they like him as a potential Mike Hilton type because he's thick at 190 some pounds, even though he's 5'9.5", and he's not afraid to throw his body around, and he's strong. But I do not expect miracles to happen and fix this. And this isn't the season to try to make miracles happen at that spot.
DeAndre, Pete and I loved MJ Stewart. There was nothing better than bringing MJ Stewart and say, we don't know what else you can do, but you know what? You're just going to blitz every rep off the edge when you're on the field. Pete, say there is a 100% positive health report on the quarterback position for next week. How do you handle this?
Wait, say that again?
Say you roll through the week and Thursday the Browns break practice, Friday off, play Saturday. The quarterback room is 100% healthy. How do you handle it?
Oh, it's a half for Shedeur and it's a half for Dillon Gabriel. Joe Flacco taking the field in preseason.
I'm not bringing up this name for Joe. I am not bringing up this name for Joe.
I don't need to see Kenny Pickett. I've seen it. 158.3 quarterback rating in the preseason. Does nothing for me. Look, there is a very short timeline for quarterbacks to matter for quarterback. I think it's about 2 seasons. After that, it is an absolute waste of everybody's time. You can, like, Russell Wilson is currently torching the Jets. Like, what does that matter? It's not Kenny Pickett beating up on scrubs or whatever, or base defenses. If he can't, then he's not in the league.
That's
so at that
the story.
Point,
That's the story.
You're not getting something that, like, somebody's going to sit there and go, oh, I want to trade for him. Like, stop it. That's not how this works. They're either going to like him or they're not already. So no, I'm entire. The preseason for me is about developing young players. And I'm hoping that because the Browns are playing the Rams, and I know how the Rams operate, they're not going to play any starters. That the Browns reciprocate, and no starters are on the field in this game. And let's be honest,
the Rams are not
without wasting any reps on starters.
Yep. Well, the Rams are not playing Matthew Stafford. We don't even know if Matthew Stafford's going to make it to week 1.
I think we're going to find out he's not playing this year.
It's getting eerily scary.
Well, there's a report from an LA Times reporter who said, asked to confirm whether Matthew Stafford worked out as scheduled, a Rams official declined to comment and said Sean McVay would address the situation on Monday. That sounds real bad.
That sounds like a very, very simple phrase of season-ending IR. And if that's the case, what in the world is Devontae Adams doing in LA?
I mean, at that point, it may just be his career is over.
Yep.
But either way, that's not what you want to hear if you're the Rams. But I have no interest in seeing starters. Losing Cornelius Lucas is a huge hindrance right now to me. I don't want to put anyone else at risk. I already don't. I'm grateful that Isaiah McGuire, DeJuan Jones, and those guys got through it okay. I do not need to see any of these guys got on the field at all in preseason. And
Okay, the
if your
follow-up to the
argument
quarterback
is
thing.
they won't be ready for the regular season, what my pushback would be, was there a preseason that all the 2s and 3s got ready for? Because they look really good right out of the gate. So trust in your practice plan, because right now what the Browns are doing is working. So that's where you get prepared. It is not some meaningless preseason game that you go through all this. Some guy gets hurt in warm-ups or whatever crap, or some guy steps on his knee wrong or doesn't play to the intensity because he thinks he's going to be out in a couple series. Don't mess with any of that. Use it to the young players. And you've got the absolute reason to tune in and enjoy it anyway, which is Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel. Let these 2 kids finish it out. There are so much this element and all these undrafted free agents and all these young players and rookies and everything else, the ones that are playing, are more than worth the to me. And obviously I'm not spending anybody else's money. They're more than worth my viewing experience. Like I'm genuinely having fun with what I'm seeing without messing around with anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, because you could have. I mean, last Friday night could have just been absolute aggravation, because everybody was so bought in, and then maybe Shedeur didn't live up. Well, he certainly lived up, and I will admit, I think Dillon looked a heck of a lot better today than I thought, and part of my concern with Dillon was going to be being out of it for a little bit, but obviously, and this is apparently why you can see why the Browns like him. It's the kid who does all the work. It's the kid who makes the teacher's life easier. This is, this is why you're here. I need you today. I'm going to throw you in there. You know what? I got to step out of the classroom for 5 minutes. Dillon, you can keep this going. And you can see why Dillon Gabriel is liked. The quarterback thing.
The bottom line, what do you need
real quick before
Gabriel?
You get to that?
Go ahead.
Real quick before you get to that. 4 quarterbacks or no 4 quarterbacks? You can't keep 4
I think they're going to keep 4 initially. But it gets a little trickier now. If Quinshon Judkins is not going to be suspended, it's a little trickier. I've been operating on the 2 bonus roster spot theory that they'd have 2 extra guys between him and Devin Bush. And if you don't have
more time to work it out,
it's a little tighter. But there are a couple teams that need backup quarterbacks. What I've seen from Miami, what I've seen from the Jets, who lost Tyrod Taylor for the season. I could see a scenario where that happens. But the thing that whatever you want to say about Dillon Gabriel, you can come with all the criticisms you want of what he does and doesn't do well. He allowed receivers to look like dudes and make plays, which is, you made it easy for you to evaluate Cedric Tillman. On the ball came out of his hand like a wet fart. It was still really accurate, but it allowed him to make the play really well. It made Jamari Thrash look tremendous. Caden Davis looks strong. Gage Laverdan looks strong. And that's not to take anything away from Shedeur Sanders, because he did the same thing. Like, that's what we want these guys to do. Style points, whatever. You have your preference in terms of what type of quarterback you like. That's fine. I had Shedeur Sanders ahead of Dillon Gabriel for the draft. Like, I had a day 3 grade on Dillon Gabriel. Age, size, all these things. I like what Shedeur brings to the table more than Gabriel, but I can't argue with what he's doing. He put those guys in position to succeed, and they did it. Like, give him his due, and that's exactly what we need. It is not a situation where, like, we've seen Deshaun Watson last year held the entire offense on hostage to the point where it felt like they had 9 guys on the field against 11 because nobody could do anything. Like, we are seeing the offense operate as the offense is supposed to operate, and 2 distinctly different, fitting to the strengths of the quarterbacks, which is exactly why I always appreciate Kevin Stefanski. He's very good of giving quarterbacks the power to sort of shape the offense to fit them. And it looked great. Dillon Gabriel doing things that we asked him to do. Shedeur Sanders last week doing things. The thing I took away from Shedeur Sanders last week, as it did not look awkward at all when he went under center or turned his back to the defense on play action. It looked seamless and easy. And, I don't think a whole lot of people even thought about the fact that he hadn't done that because it looked so easy. It never looked like, oh my God, it looks awkward as I'm doing it. It looks smooth. So people are so mad at Kevin Stefanski every single day. Something is working. And I give most of the credit to the 2 kids working. Shedeur Sanders deserves a ton of credit for his own work. And Dillon Gabriel is working hard. Like, they deserve most of the credit, but something the coaching staff is doing is putting these guys in position to succeed.
And I just wanted to point this out. Obviously, the comment I brought up here. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you got to change things. And you know what? When you have and this probably is something to do with, the way the Browns having a little more draft capital here is you have this now. And, how do you tell Mason Graham? How do you tell Carson Schlesinger, you know, we're not going to get a little more physical? These guys are rookies. They were high draft picks. They're chomping at the bit to get in there and get going. And hey, if that's one thing that's maybe made a little bit of a difference this year, and look, it doesn't mean a hill of beans now. It's August, obviously. But, I think we're all talking a little bit more positively about this product right now than I think we thought we would have been. And so there's certainly that aspect, to it to this point. I'm not sure that there's anything we haven't hit here. And it's anybody, and I see a lot in the comments, and certainly on social guys. I don't care if there's a preference. What's really important for the Browns is that they're both playing well. Again, it might not mean anything, and it's probably a really good chance it might not mean anything next April. But this team really needs some fresh blood, some youth. And between Graham, Schlesinger, and I guess hopefully we can maybe start to put Judkins in that conversation, Fannin, Gabriel, Sampson, Sanders. This is a good thing for this team because this has been part of the reason why this team kind of ended up where they have is because you sacrificed the world. And, whether we all would have made our peace with it if it had worked out and he had been good. But this is things you lost. And these were the guys who were those draft picks that you missed from those 3 drafts. Those are supposed to be the predominant players now on this team in year 4, 3, 2. Those would have been, but all that capital was gone. So this draft class is paramount for this team and for the future and all of that stuff. So, glad everybody could come out. Pete, I always hate to not make sure that he didn't basically empty the clip. So I'm sorry. I think we'd let you.
Well, I would address the super chat first. Yes, it would be amazing if I don't care what order you put them in. If one of those guys can be the franchise quarterback, everybody's happy. I don't care who. This is the thing people don't understand. I don't care. Give me a franchise quarterback. I'm not picky.
My worst enemy's kid can be this team's quarterback. I don't care.
Like, I don't care if it's Kenny Pickett. Give me a franchise quarterback. I would love it for it to be Shedeur. I would love it to be
Billy Roethlisberger.
I don't care. Give me a franchise quarterback. Like, stop. I'm not trying to do style points or trick shots. They've got 3 young guys on the roster. If one of those guys can do it, great. Then you have 2 first-round picks. I'm all for it. But as of today, Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel both look good in their preseason game. And that's all anyone should be worried about because there were any number of people who were ready to run Dillon Gabriel out of there, people primed to get him out of town if he struggled in a way that the opposite would have been true if there would have been some people who were ready to get rid of Shedeur Sanders had he struggled. There are also a whole lot of apologists just waiting for him to then blame the organization for him to struggle. Look, you can like who you like, but from my perspective, I don't care. Give me good quarterbacks, whoever it is, whatever it's going to take to get the good quarterback. That's not what we already did with Deshaun Watson. But man, it's an absolute unnecessary to me to pin these kids against each other. Both of them are doing well, which is what I want. So beyond that, I'm the thing I'm taking away from this is I like the approach the Browns are taking to their training camp overall. To me, it's working. And I'm not yelling at you. I'm yelling at, trust me, you're not the problem. I am approving of how the Browns are handling training camp in terms of getting these guys ready. This is what I have wanted. Everybody talks about you need preseason to get ready for games. You don't. Again, the number 2s and number 3s did not need a preseason to get ready to start the preseason. They look great right out of the gate, including Shedeur Sanders look great right out of the gate. How you practice is far more illustrative of how you're going to come out and start the season. They're practicing in a way that is getting these guys ready. The Browns are out physicaling teams they're playing against. That includes the reigning Super Bowl champion. The Browns are the more physical team, and that is incredibly important. They're going to have to be that if they're going to be successful. I still don't have high hopes in the standings, but as I watch this, with the whole Quinshon Judkins things, I sort of immediately flushed the idea that the Browns were going to give the Bengals a problem week 1. I'm slowly warming to the idea the Browns are once again going to be a real problem for the Cincinnati Bengals week 1 because
with
of the
injury,
way they play.
offensive line injuries. Absolutely. Not to mention Myles Garrett is their worst nightmare to begin with anyway. But look, you got to get through another week here. And then obviously, it's another partial 2 weeks because the way you get in on regular season mode here. But look, stacking days and this team, and it's weird because I think everybody came into this camp to this point with the absolute lowest of expectations. And the positive thing is I think they've exceeded whatever expectations we had by a lot. So I think generally, most Browns fans should be pretty excited about it. The Gabriel Sanders conversations, you want to have them. That's great. They're awfully premature. We know it's going to be Joe, and how it goes with Joe is going to determine where this goes. But before we can even get to what the conversations of Gabriel versus Sanders, I do think there's an interesting thing where if you could get Shedeur to play at the speed and alacrity that Gabriel plays at, you would have your answer. Because as Pete said earlier, Shedeur probably has the bigger tool bag, whereas Dillon Gabriel would maybe be the guy that would. It's working out well, and again, I don't know that either one of them is the long-term answer here. I don't know that either one of them is going to get the opportunity in 2025 to give you enough of a sample size that's going to tell you that either one of them is it. And it could make for an interesting summer next year where you got 3 quarterbacks and somebody else, but the majority of the 3 quarterbacks are 24 years and younger. And, we'll have these conversations again next summer. But it's a heck of a lot better than talking about Bailey Zappi. I ain't going to lie to you. It's a hell of a lot better than talking about Bailey Zappi, which is certainly conversations we've had to have. So we're going to take this home. Look, obviously there'll be a lot of work here. I see Jack Duffin came out of his whatever shell he is, across the pond. He's already got snap counts up for you. There'll be work coming from everybody. I'll get you guys up an episode tomorrow. Once we get a little bit more deeper into this, watch through again. But just liking basically the way this team is operating right now. And, I think I feel a little bit more positive about things. And I even remember once the draft was over and, I kept messaging Pete, it's like, are they doing anything as far as undrafted free agents? And it was certainly a small group, but the small group it is, a group that's out there showing. And, it's kind of where it's at. Certainly, some guys will come in, some guys go out, work to be done here, but I got news for you. I believe it's Sunday, September 7th against the Cincinnati Bengals. It's coming a hell of a lot faster than anybody believes it is. So, again, thank you for everybody. Of course, Fred Greetham here. Ian McBride behind. Fantastic. Helping us out here. Ian, greatly, greatly appreciate it. Pete Smith, Jeff Lloyd, Browns, Philadelphia, 22-13. We got a week of Shedeur Sanders last week. We basically got the week of Dillon Gabriel this week. Should make for a fun final week of preseason games here this week before they face the Rams on Saturday. From the OBR, from everybody, make sure, of course, that you are over at theobr.com. Check out the VIP package. Bundles, of course, now with Paramount Plus. So if you're a UFC fan, that might be something that doubly interests you. And of course, subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Twitch, of course, and we will talk to you all soon.